Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I am so grateful for everyone that has spoken to date. I will say, if I had my career over again, I'd absolutely choose occupational therapy. So thank you, Julie. I love everyone in this space and what they are doing. So I do have a presentation, but promise, hopefully it'll jump up. Me today, I'll be discussing balancing acts, so navigating activity management with ME. So I will formally introduce myself. I am Raeya. My pronouns are she, her, which is on my nice little slide over here. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians of the land, specifically the Bunurong people, of which I am here today, of the Kulin Nation, as it is their land I am meeting you on. I pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So I'm just going to keep going through. Okay, sorry, it looks like I should be able to share my screen now. Let me find that button. Screen, there we go. I don't know what slide it's going to take you to, so here we go.
And thanks, Danielle, for working your magic.
Yes, thank you so much. There we go, there's my slides. Oh, phew. Okay, I'm not sure what everyone else can see, but I can see them. So a little bit about me. I actually come from personal experience. At the age of 14, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I spent the next roughly about 5 years between being housebound and periods of time being bedbound. And during that period of time, I actually made myself 2 promises. And one was that if I ever found myself in a better position, in the sense of being higher functioning than I was at that point in time, that I would make sure that I would support as many people with these conditions as I possibly could. And the other one, being young, is that I would make up for lost time, which meant that I put many things on my bucket list to do. So that took me into the career that I happened to find myself. I've been in this particular population. I've been working with ME and CFS and other invisible illnesses that we tend to see around these. So I started in chronic fatigue. I then moved into chronic pain, then moved into dysautonomia and hypermobility spectrum disorders or connective tissue disorders, sleep disorders, long COVID, anything that we tend to see the mixture of. So I have actually been working in this field for roughly about 10 years, and I pride myself on working with both the evidence-based practice, but also my personal experience in just understanding and really being able to empathise in where I personally come from. And I know all of our journeys are different, but I've found that that's really been the heart of, if you love what you do, it's not work. So I'm very, very grateful for that. I've dabbled in a little bit here and there throughout the last 10 years. And one thing that I'm super proud of is last year I was a co-researcher in some studies around adolescence and emerging into adulthood, and how ME/CFS actually influences that and the way that they feel they can access adulthood, which was really fantastic, and that should be getting published later on this year, hopefully. Fingers crossed. So I would be doing a disservice if I didn't briefly talk about pacing. That is, in my workplace, I'm known as the queen of pacing. It is how I found my capacity again. It is what I live and breathe. I honestly think my brain just starts with pacing and then everything else exists around that. Now, I'm well aware that we are very well across pacing, so please forgive me. But in going into my next topic, being biofeedback strategies, I feel it's really important to cover this. So we all understand the importance of pacing. It is symptom management, it is prevention and limitation of PEM, flare-up prevention, capacity prediction, theoretically, activity management, which also allows us within all of this to potentially take into account or manage other factors such as food and hydration, sleep management, minimizing booming and busting, all of those kind of things. So just access, essentially. So as we know, in absence of a primary treatment in ME, CFS, and now severe long COVID, the mainstay of treatment is prevention of illness exacerbation by carefully pacing. So that is the foundation of everything of which I build. So we know that the better one prevents PEM, the more likely one is to stabilise and or improve, and the opposite is also true. Pushing into PEM may result in severe crashes, and as we all know that, unfortunately, I've experienced that, and that's I'm not going to go into that. So if we dive into pacing and understand that one of the major pieces of pacing is understanding our invisible illness. Sorry, I tend to use the umbrella term invisible illness, forgive me. So if we understand our ME, specifically, we then understand how much that influences our nervous system and how much our nervous system then influences that. And today is not about the nervous system, but it's important to tie in because that'll come back into some of the biofeedback strategies that I talk about next. So pacing means that we understand our energy expenditures, including all types of physiological stress. So this is physical activity, this is orthostatic stress, this is cognitive work, this is emotional challenges, exchanges, infection, poor sleep, sensory input, and all of the others. And then we also take into account things like type, intensity, frequency, duration of triggers, and that's how we best understand PEM. So we all know what PEM is, and forgive me, I'll use PEM for today, but I do also want to acknowledge that some of the literature is moving towards post-exertional neuroimmune exhaustion and also post-exertional symptom exacerbation. So whichever term you use, forgive me for today, I'll be using PEM. Also, I apologise, I do tend to talk very quickly when I'm excited. I did consciously tell myself to rein it in, but I'm very excited to be here. Those watching back later on, I hope you slow me down. I'm used to being watched on videos, so apologies. So I don't want to go too much into pacing, but this is just a really important area that we want to take into account. So it's really important. My narrative is always about finding your version of pacing, very similar to what Julian and occupational therapists focus on. Pacing is as unique as you are, and I personally call it a bit of a Goldilocks theory. There's too hot, there's too cold, there's too much, there's too little, there's something beautiful in between. Your biggest symptoms will influence what you feel you can and cannot do. Likewise, your diagnoses will also, and your conditions will also influence your pacing. So understanding your symptoms, your conditions, your tendencies, they will play a very large role in this. For instance, for those with, say, a neurodiverse background, neurodivergence-based background, if you have something like ADHD, this may actually influence how it is you can access pacing. And not acknowledging that and trying to do it in a mainstream way means that you are not necessarily being neuroaffirming to yourself, but also means you're putting in potentially more energy into pacing than you're getting out of it, just purely from the way we go about it. So it's understanding pacing in our different domains as well, and how best we can accommodate around those. So starting with what you know and understand and building out from there, and coming back to it's absolutely not a one size fits all. I also like to tell people to base their pacing on the idealistic version of themselves and the version of their capacity that is more towards their bad days or their neutral days, comparatively to your idealistic version of what you'd like your pacing to look like. I know for me, every time I came out of a very large relapse or setback, I'd get out a brand new journal and I'd get out a new plan and I'd write out my daily structure and I'd write out my pacing intentions for the week, similar to an activity diary, but projected. And I always put it down to what I wanted to be able to do and what I wanted to, very toxically, what I wanted to force my body to do at that point in time. There was a lot of self-related gaslighting and medical-related gaslighting that I was experiencing at that point in time. So it took me a very long time to realize that pacing had to be my own. So pacing is intimate, it's yours. And it's okay if you've tried something and that hasn't worked for you, finding your version of that. And also understanding, leaning into what you don't know or what you struggle with and allowing that to help build in your constructs. And in addition to this, understanding your triggers and your rest and recovery modalities as a result from those triggers. So trying to understand which strategies are going to be most specific for the activity or energy expenditure you've done related to the PEM that you're experiencing. So that will change from person to person. Now, probably a little bit late, but I should actually introduce that I am an exercise physiologist, and I do apologise. I know that that is a very triggering term for this population, which is why I've hopefully shown my knowledge a little bit around pacing to say that I am a safe practitioner. I do need to acknowledge that no, absolutely, I do not do GET, nor have I ever. I am a patient of being told to do GET myself, and I understand the medical related trauma we may have there. And I do apologise for having exercise in my title, essentially. Now, I will just say, I do want to highlight, I am across the evidence-based practice for ME and exercise, and although exercise is in my title, it is very rare that I'm prescribing a program, and that is very dependent on the diagnosis of the person in front of me, and also their capacity. A lot of times I don't actually talk about it at all. So I will note that exercise physiologists are unique to Australia. We're a subsection of allied health that are trained in the art and medicine of movement, and in doing a master's degree of physiology, an EP is taught on a molecular level the impact of movement on the body. Now, I will say that ME/CFS is not covered in the curriculum of EP, so if you are looking towards engaging with an exercise physiologist, you want to find someone who's actually specialised in that area and spent time upskilling, because otherwise standard EPs actually just don't know ME/CFS practice. And this is why, as I said, I've moved towards more of pacing narrative and more activity and symptom management. That's what I think, my job description is comparatively to exercise physiology. So I think, it is understood in the ME world that exercise absolutely can and will make you worse. There's very much evidence to suggest staying away from it. And as I said, I need to clarify, I am anti-get, but we do also understand that we want to understand our threshold for triggering PEM, and the fact that that varies day to day and different stages of illness and from person to person. So this needs to be taken into account when discussing activity. And I know that where my conversations with people come in is that they may want to build their activity, or they may have goals that require more than what they physically can do at this point in time. So this is where someone like myself will come in. I tend to explain it like dating, please bear with me, but I need to know as much about the person as possible, their capacity, their triggers, their PEM, their pacing, their level of interoception, their level of recharge modalities, and once I and we know them together, we can look at activity management. Now, this might be building capacity or duration of sitting upright in bed, or clenching or unclenching muscles, or this might be specific for an event preparation and how best to pace and modify your triggers, whatever that may be. So it definitely looks different from person to person. But this is also where biofeedback strategies can come into this, and that's the next part of my presentation. Apologies, I can't multitask. If there's questions, I hope I will get to them. I can't be in my headspace and read questions at the same time. Well, I can, it just doesn't work too well. So biofeedback, it's a technique of gaining greater awareness of many physiological functions in one's body, and this could be using electronic or other instruments. It was initially introduced with the goal of being able to manipulate the body systems at will. So biofeedback can be utilised in a myriad of health conditions and within many different treatment modalities, such as biofeedback practitioners or those who have done professional development in this area, such as medical or allied health. Using biofeedback is a very individual approach, and something we continue to explore, especially in the ME space, and it shouldn't be confused with heart rate pacing techniques. Okay. So biofeedback strategy options. First of all, this is absolutely not an all-inclusive list. These are the most relevant and most typically discussed within the ME community at present. So I'll briefly go through each of them. And again, I don't have enough time to dive into them to the extent that I would like to. So if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to do some follow-up questions, or I know Rachel and I spoke a bit of about a blog post in the future. So in terms of heart rate monitoring, many people with ME are now using heart rate monitors as an energy management strategy to more accurately pace their daily activity and monitor their body's responses to physical exertion. There are no yet defined protocols for heart rate monitoring, and those in this population are using many different methods. This could be such as a heart rate could be set to a limit for you to aim to stay under, or as a guide to minimise time spent above. You can also use it as part of an assessment period to assist with symptom and activity analysis to help with future energy expenditure management planning. Heart rate monitoring for energy management is not the same as using heart rate to set zones for exercise. Heart rate is used more as a way to indicate that they are working too hard so that they can reduce their energy expenditure. Heart rate monitoring can be used to determine baseline, such as reading your heart rate in the morning and accommodating around the data, such as adapting your day around a poorer reading. And this is keeping your heart rate lower than estimated anaerobic threshold, which may help guide activity intensity. And I'll touch on that a little bit in the future. Yes, I'm coming to Workwell Foundation. I don't recommend any singular device. It's very dependent on budget and requirements of the individual, and also just where the individual comes from and what it is they can access, but what that also integrates with too, depending on what you want it for. So, apologies, I'm trying to make up for lost time. Heart rate variability monitoring. So this is the physiological phenomenon of variation in the time between intervals between heartbeats, and it's measured by the variation in the beat-to-beat interval. So a higher heart rate variability is considered better than a lower HRV. High HRV may occur when the relaxation response, so the parasympathetic arm of the autonomic nervous system, is more activated, resulting in decreased time between heartbeats. This may be seen when you are relaxed. In this state, you have more flexibility and resilience in switching between low and high heart rates. In general, low heart rate variability is considered a sign of stress, less resilience, and struggles with handling changing situations. It's also more common in people with higher resting heart rates too. So it gets a little bit confusing in the dysautonomia population, I'll tell you that. Heart rate variability is another way of monitoring the body's physiology and becoming a common function on many commercially available devices. HRV monitoring is used anecdotally by people with ME and also in research to give information regarding the autonomic nervous system. You can also focus on tools and activities to try and influence your HRV as well. So understanding HRV is kind of like understanding your bank balance, and using the data within the HRV is like determining where your money is going and how much. So understanding what is positive, negative, or more neutral within your activities. And this can also alter physically, cognitively, emotionally, etc. Context is extremely important when we have conversations around, say, heart rate or HRV. And things such as regulating breathing can also positively influence HRV. There are many devices out there too, so I will acknowledge that chest straps and wrist, ring or finger pulse oximeters are the most accurate. We know that a lot of wrist-based devices are coming out with this particular reading of data. They have a few more barriers in regards to accuracy, and none have been validated yet in regards to HRV that I know of, and that could also vary from different countries if you're listening to this internationally. Okay. So briefly on the next few, step count monitoring. This can help us know daily and weekly step count data, helping to identify baseline. This can help in prevention of PEM related to physical activity, and it's accessible even within your mobile devices and within, say, any wearable devices too. However, the limitation within step count monitoring, and there are limitations from each strategy that I've mentioned today, step count specifically definitely doesn't take into account cognitive, emotional, or environmental context, and how that can also influence and exacerbate PEM. So each of these have their pros and cons. And as I said early on, it's really important that we have our foundations of pacing before we have these. So into my second last one, vagus nerve stimulation. First of all, the vagus nerve is also known as vagal nerves, are the main nerves of your parasympathetic nervous system. This system controls specific body functions such as your digestion, heart rate, and immune system. These functions are involuntary, meaning you can't consciously control them. Vagus nerve stimulation is a medical treatment that involves delivering electrical impulses to the vagus nerve. This is done either via implantation, such as in epilepsy cases is where we sort of first saw it, or wearable devices. But there are now lots of devices out there, not just implants, and there's a growing body of evidence coming out, much more research coming, and some research coming in Australia, which is really exciting. But some ME/CFS patients have found that regular manual vagus nerve stimulation improves their symptoms, both in short and long term, but this has varying degrees of efficacy. And regular breath work and controlled breathing has also been shown to have similar results, again, depending on the context. Okay. Lastly, I'm sorry, I saw a brief comment, but I didn't actually see the entire thing. Then we do have the CPET testing. So this stands for cardiopulmonary exercise test, which is here in Australia more so commonly known as VO2, oxygen consumption testing. This is a specialized type of stress test or exercise test that measures your exercise ability. It's designed to create a lactate threshold and data which then gives you working ranges to be within and to prevent PEM. This can also be done in submaximal VO2 testing, which then can come up with a VO2 estimate. Workwell developed a 2-day CPET protocol to measure the hallmark feature of ME/CFS, so PEM, and it was focusing on disability evaluation to document impairment for disability purposes, to measure the ability to perform and sustain work. This gives you your anaerobic threshold, which is then used as a marker to ideally aim to stick below within your day. This has its pros in the sense that it can actually visually show results around PEM and the decrease in performance within the second day. And it can also give you a number and a reference point as your guides back to some of your other biofeedback strategies. However, the cons do speak for themselves when it comes to PEM, flare-up, setbacks, and how it could influence some other factors. It also doesn't encourage interoceptive understanding around your symptom profile. So that's definitely not one that I tend to suggest to people, nor have I ever done. So all of these biofeedback strategies have their pros and cons and have been used widely within the ME community. However, it's about finding the right one for the right person that supplied them with the information and understanding to manage their capacity, their symptoms, and PEM prevention, most importantly. So just to summarize, essentially, sorry, yes, I am up to date, sorry. We can use this to help you understand the data, sift through what is important, helps you understand your triggers and management strategies and troubleshoot accordingly. They can also help in understanding the data as a whole person and not only what that can influence, but what it will influence and how to accommodate accordingly. And to help you use the data to know when to slow down, pull back, stabilize, or even build capacity, depending on the person, where applicable and appropriate. So they can be used in many ways. Apologies, I have gone over time, so I did rush it a little bit at the end, and sorry. I do have my references there, and that's the end of my slides. Sorry for the technical challenges to begin with, and thank you for having me.
That's good. No, thanks. Raeya, what we might do now, we've got a bit of time for questions as we get ready for the lived experience. We'll sort of blend that in with a break. So we'll sort of take some questions now, maybe have a 5-minute break as we get ready for those with lived experience. But I'll just, I suppose, if anyone's got any questions, we do have someone with their hand up. If I can. Gary, had your hand up for a while ago. No, all good. Oh, Gary, do you have a question? Sandra Mayer as well. If you're able to activate your microphone, or if not, chuck it in the chat. Okay, that's okay. Accidental hand raise. It's how you buy a house accidentally too. Is there? Just trying to look back through the questions and see if I can see any that are there for anyone. We had a few of the questions on the LDN, and they look like mostly been answered, I think. Shelley, if you are, feel free to jump in if you've got a question. Aha, I can allow mics. That's what's probably people's problems are. Shelley, if you want to have a try unmuting yourself, it might work. Thanks, crossed.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it did just let me unmute. Amazingly. Sorry. I'm Shelley. Hi, nice to meet you, Raeya. Thanks for your presentation. I just quickly wanted to ask, with the heart rate variability, certainly we have tried to use that ourselves with very little knowledge, and it is very difficult. Is it something that you just tend to look at over a long trend line of a few days or a few weeks, or is it something that you use more on a daily basis, the heart rate variability?
Thank you for the question. And look, I think, to be honest, I use both. It is towards the rarer end of things that I talk a lot about biofeedback strategies with my patients. But yes, you can absolutely look at HRV on more of a longer term, days to weeks, and then acutely within particular episodes. Because interestingly, with HRV, you do get varying results from different things. So you may have a lower HRV related to a stress response. You may have a higher HRV related to a nice, gentle, calming activity. So you can actually look at your HRV within acute situations. So something that you're thinking might be taking more activity than it is might be something like reading to your child, and it might actually be increasing your HRV when you didn't actually think so. So it can provide data and information that you didn't know was there with that number. So that's an acute version of understanding HRV or how an activity may influence your HRV. On the flip of that, there are individuals who can check their HRV, then do some breath work, and then check their HRV again and look for that positive change. So again, they're both acute versions. In terms of maybe more of a longer term option, you can start to look at those trends behind your weekly, your days within weeks and weeks within months to see if there are any connections. So for those who menstruate may experience a lower HRV leading up to their cycle, for instance, and having a trend over the span of a month, you can actually see that rather than being in it day to day. It is a lot of data to look at though, and it is a lot to sift through, and it makes you feel a little bit more like a computer rather than a whole body and a whole person. So I suppose though there are two examples of the way that you can look at data. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, perfectly. Thank you very much.
Sandra had a question as well. She put in the chat, how can health professionals and OT become more involved?
Oh, amazing question. Is this for me or Julie? Is Julie around to unmute?
Happy for Julie to take it if Julie's there as well. Or both of you to take it.
No, happy to. I don't want to step on toes.
No, I think I'm happy for you to take it, Raeya, if you want, but I think it's one of those things that we're looking for. I'm certainly looking for opportunities for OTs to be more involved. And as I say, we're kind of doing our little bit to try and educate, at conferences and with publishing papers the OTs will read to try and make them realise they already have all the skills they need, but they do need to learn about ME. So, but I don't know, from an EP point of view, Raeya?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. A big focus that we do, because we are EPs, and that's a little bit of a weird profession to be in when it comes to ME, we spend a lot of time on referral relationships and making sure people know who we are, what we do, and we know who they are and what they do and whether they're a safe referral. So we have about 100, 150 people in our network that we can roughly go to in terms of GPs, allied healths, medical professionals, specialists, etc. So the biggest thing that I encourage is trying to get your health professionals to speak to one another. And I always suggest a multidisciplinary team, because it they say it takes a village to raise a child. That's absolutely true for any chronic illness as well. And I can say that having raised a child at the moment, it takes a village, and having had a chronic illness, it takes a village, and I actually know which one's harder. It's not the child. So I think with that, it's important to encourage that your health team is speaking to one another and getting them to do their upskilling. So being either prepared to work with them a little bit on the early days, or encouraging them to reach out, or finding someone who's specialised in that area and even asking their support to help you find someone.